Good evening. My name is Dan Kraus. I'm the Western Conservation Scientist with the Nature Conservancy of Canada, and I'm going to talk to you tonight about the importance of conserving our Canadian forests. And the title of my talk is The Tree That Changed the World. I'm here tonight because of a contest. We're actually all here tonight because of this contest. It's a contest where the winners survive and the losers perish. It's a contest that's going on right now, but it started 400 million years ago. The contestants are plants, and the prize is sunlight. At one point on Earth, all plants were grasses, sedges, ferns, horsetails, green plants that use chlorophyll to capture sunlight, turn it into food, turn it into energy. The contest was to see who could get the sunlight first. At some point, at some place, there was a grand change in the design of green plants. And while these ancient green plants had cellulose or wood in their cellular toolbox, there was a change in how it was used. Instead of just using cellulose as an exterior, as a raincoat, it became incorporated into stems. This new woody structure was accompanied by a complex evolutionary change in their internal plumbing that gave these plants the ability to grow tall, to maintain that structure, and to reach for the sky. Stems gave rise to wood, gave rise to trunks. This gave rise to the first trees and the first forests, and our world was changed forever. There are a few other groups of species that have come to impact the face of our planet than trees. We define the major life zones on Earth based on the presence or absence of forests. From these first trees came the first forests that have come to alter the chemical, physical, and biological cycles that drive our planet, that are the foundations of life. These forests are rainmakers, air conditioners, water reservoirs, chemical recyclers, and keepers of biodiversity. They also became major sinks of carbon dioxide. Many of these ancient forests, particularly those that grew in wet areas, after tens of millions of years of growth and death, held so much carbon that the carbon they stored then has become the reserves of coal, oil, and tar sands that we use today. Over the last hundreds of millions of years, while the amount of tree cover has shifted through the eons in different parts of the world in response to plate tectonics and long-term warming and cooling cycles, our planet, our living planet, has remained a planet, certainly with ice and with deserts and grasslands, but mostly a planet dominated by vast forests and by vast oceans. The changes we've seen more recently in our forests have not been caused by plate tectonics or long-term climate cycles, but by me, by you, by us. We've converted almost 50% of our planet's forests into croplands, ranches, plantations, subdivisions, and highways. For much of the remainder, we've claimed them as working forests to provide us with fiber, with fuel, and with timber. Indeed, our collective global forest heritage has shrunk to just a few places across the planet. The largest are now restricted to the tropical rainforest in the Amazon and a swath of boreal forest that extends from Labrador through Alberta into Alaska. With the largest intact forest remaining on Earth, not in the rainforests of Africa, not in the Amazon, but here at home in Canada, straddling the heart of the boreal forest on the border of Ontario and Manitoba. Canada is a forest nation. Yes, we have spectacular mountains, prairie grasslands, Arctic barrens, and oceans, but the one habitat that runs through every province, every territory, are our forests. Here in Canada, we're both a large nation and a small nation. With a Geography 101, we cover about 6% of the world's terrestrial real estate, but as Canadians, only about 0.5% of people alive today are lucky enough to be Canadians. On that 6% of the planet, we steward 9% of the world's forests. On that 6% of the planet, we steward a full 25% of the world's remaining intact forests. Being Canadian, it's easy to think that trees are ubiquitous, and we see our northern forests as common. The heartland of Canada is indeed a heartland of trees, rocks, and water, eh? But when we look at the world through our trees, what we hold as abundant is, from a global perspective, a rare and dwindling resource. And Canadians, as custodians of our northern forests with their trees, their rocks, and their water, are custodians of some of the last great forests that are left on Earth. Our Canadian forests are so big that they even impact the composition of the atmosphere. Now, the dark line on this graph shows a steady climb in the average amount of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere, but what I want you to look at is that red line. So that red line shows seasonal variation in carbon dioxide. Seasonal declines occur each year in spring, when springtime comes to the north and our planet's photosynthesis goes into overdrive. Part of that annual global decline is our northern Canadian forests waking up after a long winter's sleep and inhaling massive amounts of carbon dioxide. Canada's forests are important for Canadians. Canada's forests are important for the world. In Alberta, not only are we custodians of some very large forests, Alberta's forests cover an area larger than Montana, but we're also keepers of important forest biodiversity and richness. From boreal forests in the north that support the world's largest herd of free-roaming wood bison, to interior dry forests, high alpine forests, to the magnificent meeting place of the Rocky Mountain forests and the Great Plains along the eastern slopes, Albertans steward an incredible diversity of forests. These big, diverse forests support some of the richest collections of large mammals left in North America. This map shows the historic and current number of big carnivores and other wide-ranging animals. These are animals that need big, wild spaces to survive. Not only did Alberta once have one of North America's greatest assemblages of large mammals in the past, it's one of the last places where this diversity of big mammals survives. So the question is, how can we protect this large, diverse forest landscape, make sure it continues to benefit nature and people? There's certainly been a century of great improvements in forestry practices, and we've all benefited from it in Canada. But we're seeing a new assault on our forests, invasive species, and continued habitat loss and fragmentation in key areas. Healthy forests in the future are going to require an investment today. This is a map I've been working on, the Nature Conservancy of Canada. It's a map that we've been developing to assess our human influence on the natural ecosystems in Canada. You can see that much of southern Canada, it's under great risk. This is a very region of Canada where we have the greatest diversity of wildlife and the place where most of us live. This is a place where we've lost or degraded many of our forests and where many of our rarest plants and animals need our help. You can also see that different story in the north, where the last global vestiges of forest wilderness remain. So here is Canada's conservation challenge for the future. Here is our conservation challenge for the future as Canadians. How can we protect the rare, vanishing, declining forests in southern Canada, where most Canadians live, but also ensure the conservation of some of the world's most pristine forests in our northern land? We know there's great conservation work that's happening, but we're still losing ground, and our collective stewardship of our forest nation may be falling behind. A 2010 report by the federal government on ecosystem status and trends in Canada concluded that the quality and intactness of our forests are declining, along with the area of old growth. A recently released report by the United Nations highlights how Canada compares to other countries when it comes to forest protection. Approximately 7% of Canada's forests are found in parks and protected areas. Now, this is a significant amount of forests in a country as large as Canada, but we're behind other nations in the percentage of forests that we've protected. Canadians need to invest more in their forests. As a scientist, as a Canadian, as a dad, I know there's few better investments than a forest, better returns than a tree. I can promise you something. I can promise you this, that there's few investments that will endure, that will appreciate in value or be appreciated in value as much as our forests. And I know this because we only need to look at examples where groups of people work together to protect the forests that we've inherited. Banff National Park, Wood Buffalo National Park, Sheep River Provincial Park. These are all places where people of good conscience banded together to protect forests. Today, we don't hear complaints that these places were protected. No one laments that there's too many damn trees in Banff, that it should have been made a little bit smaller. These are all places that come to be treasured by local communities. They provide a sense of place, they create healthy environments, they grow and support local economies, they come to define the communities and the people that live there. In Alberta, in Canada, we've been very lucky to have an abundance of forests. This abundance has meant that there's always more. The thing is now, from a global perspective, healthy forests aren't as abundant, they're continuing to decline, and there just isn't anymore. The world that we want our children to inherit are going to be based on the decisions that we make today. I encourage you to get out and learn more about our forests and the forest conservation projects we're working on at the Nature Conservancy of Canada. Together, we can be those people of good conscience to manage and protect our forests for our children and for our future. We can be those people that grow the trees that will change the world. Thank you.